Okay, I think we can all agree that I'm the best. I've got this apologetics thing down and I'm fantastic. Now and again I have to refer to the work of some other guys, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick rundown of some of my favourite people that I think are brilliant in their fields. They're all worth checking out. Some of them do cover the same kinds of areas, but it's always really good to sort of get a fresh perspective on the same thing, because sometimes one of them will explain something and you don't quite grasp it, and then the other one will explain the same thing, and they'll sort of fill in each other's gaps and they'll help you understand it better as a whole. They kind of, they can complement each other. So here we go in sort of no particular order. First, William Lane Craig. This guy has a list of credentials as long as your arm, and he's like a walking apologetics encyclopedia. He regularly debates non-believers and Muslims, and so far he is undefeated. For most of us who do apologetics, we rate him as at least among the best, if not the actual best. What he does is he breaks down the evidence and the facts and puts them together in really neat, easy to follow syllogisms. And what I love about that is A, it makes it simple to get your head around, and B, it spells out clearly what skeptics have to prove or disprove to hold their position. In debates, it's kind of funny that Craig basically draws a target for his opponents to aim at and leaves it wide open. He knows his stuff so well that he knows his rivals are just never going to hit the bullseye. Next is John Lennon. No, it isn't. Next is John Lennox. This is the guy who actually got me into apologetics. Wait, no, is that fair? No. Well, I don't know. I had already read Lee Strobel's Case for Christ, and I suppose that got the appetite going. But the first Christian versus atheist debates I watched were the two with John Lennox versus Richard Dawkins, and this is what I always tell everyone. Dawkins comes out spouting his usual spiel that so many people just eat up, and Lennox kindly, gently and eloquently explains why he is wrong in every single way. It's amazing to me that Dawkins shows his face again in public, let alone that every time he does, he says the same stuff that he was saying in these debates that was just so shown up. Lennox, anyway, he studied under C.S. Lewis himself, and in many ways he feels like he's a sort of Irish reincarnation of him. He's just this kind of lovely Celtic cuddly grandpa, Santa Claus, and he's smart and witty and really knowledgeable. One of the kind of good things about him is he doesn't have the same sort of cold logical approach that Craig does, but he still seems to have the same amount of understanding of all the subject matter. I can't recommend him enough. So yeah, after Lennox, I can't leave C.S. Lewis off the list, can I? Obviously he's best known for his Chronicles of Narnia books, which are fiction with a lot of Christianity themes mixed in, but he's got a load of other stuff that is just apologetics driven. Considering that all of his books were out before like a lot of the scientific and historical evidence that we had today was available, his material is really amazing. He's got this great grasp of the human condition and a way with words that makes it so easy to understand the complex and really deep subjects that he covers. Some of his books are straight up factual, like Mere Christianity, but other times he uses fiction to do the job, like in the excellent Screwtape Letters, and even Narnia. Some of the strength of his work is how it details how he went from being an atheist to becoming a Christian, so you've got that kind of story and step-by-step progress there, and he gives the evidence that changed his mind and the arguments, and he mainly is all dealing with the subjects like morality and virtues and the meaning of life. Next I've got Jim Warner Wallace. I mentioned Lee Strobel earlier, and I don't want to be harsh, but I just don't rate him as much as these other guys. The thing with Strobel is that he was an atheist and he worked as an investigative journalist, and he used his work skills to investigate the truth of the Bible, and through that investigation he discovered that he had no choice but to become a Christian. It's great stuff, and his book is really great as sort of an intro to apologetics, but I think that's sort of the extent of it. He's kind of like the doorman to a VIP party where all these other guys are hanging out. Jim Wallace is a similar story, but I think his material is just outstanding. He was an atheist, and his work was as a cold case homicide detective, so that meant it was his job to solve major crimes that were decades old, where the leftover evidence was limited and there probably weren't any eyewitnesses left around to question. So he used his skills from that job, solving age-old cases, and applied them to the Bible. And his intent was to disprove it, because he was quite happy being an atheist. But just like what happened with Lee Strobel, is that he went in, dived into the evidence that was there, and he came out just thinking, actually, no, I've got no choice, I have to believe this, the evidence is all there. So yeah, check him out for stuff to do with like the historicity of Jesus and the reliability of the New Testament, but he does have lots of other stuff as well that kind of touches on, you know, things like morality and cosmology and so on. Mentioning cosmology, we now go on to Hugh Ross. Forget Bill Nye the Science Guy. Hugh Ross is the science boss. He was like a cosmology wunderkind who absorbed as much about physics as he could, and astronomy, before he'd even hit puberty. And as a teen, he decided to check out various scriptures from around the world to see if any of them matched up to what he knew. And then he was amazed to find that the Bible was really accurate, and it just seemed to be describing the science that he had grown up with. Since then, he's worked in cosmology, and he tells us that the evidence for God's existence is just growing every month. So obviously a lot of his focus is on stuff about the creation of the universe, the fine-tuning, but he also does a lot of emphasis on the book of Job and Genesis and how they match, and how to interpret them. He's also got a really smart sidekick in the shape of Fuzz Rana, who deals more with the biology side of things, but they're both really great at what they do. Ravizacharias. Ravi seems to have an anecdote for every occasion, and they're all powerful in his apologetic work. He mainly does public speaking rather than debates, but he's always willing to talk to people and answer questions with his own eloquent style. It frustrates some people though when they offer an objection. He replies with a story that at first it just kind of doesn't seem relevant, but you have to kind of give him a few minutes, and then the climax is more often enough is a gut punch to whatever sceptical argument they offered him. Gary Habermas. Another one for New Testament studies. Habermas is famous for his minimal facts argument. Using less than a handful of agreed upon historical facts about Jesus Christ, he can pretty much prove the resurrection happened. He's also got like really interesting material on how to deal with personal doubts, and he's one of the very few apologists that I know of who has studied things like near-death experiences and the Turin Shroud. One of the points he really drives home is that Christianity hangs on the truth of the resurrection. If the resurrection happened, we don't need to worry so much about any of the other issues. Kind of connected to Habermas is Craig Keener. This guy was an atheist until he personally witnessed a miracle. After that, he began a mission to document as many miracles as possible, and he only takes the best he can find, the kind of ones that have before and after photos, and they have medical notes from doctors and physicians who saw what happened. He doesn't deal with just hearsay. He also, like Habermas, does some near-death experience stuff, and he gives lectures on how to understand the New Testament in the proper context. David Wood. David Wood is a really funny guy who has a good grasp of the classic arguments for theism and Christianity, but spends most of his time debunking and rebutting Islam. He's so thorough in his work, and there are just no ways that Muslims can possibly respond to his criticisms. Again, Wood was an atheist before he became a Christian after studying the evidence, and he had more than a hand in converting Nabil Qureshi away from Islam, which led to him becoming yet another really good, fantastic apologist for Christianity. Stephen Meyer, probably a controversial one for this. Meyer is one of the top guys when it comes to intelligent design. He is a Christian, but he makes it clear that intelligent design isn't actually connected in any way to religion. It's entirely based on scientific evidences, and it's a scientific hypothesis. But what he does make a point of is that even though Darwinian evolution is taught in schools, they should also be teaching all of the problems and flaws that are with it, instead of just saying this is the fact of reality. Mike Winger. The guys I've listed so far have been mainly science types and philosophers, and they're all really well known. It got to a point for me where I was basically done with looking at why I should believe in Christianity, and I wanted to move on to things like the deeper messages of the Bible and the meanings of texts I didn't really understand. The kind of things you'd call in-house debates. And unfortunately for me, my list of favourite apologists didn't always have huge amounts of material to offer when it came to working out what difficult passages meant. That's when I came across Mike Winger, he has this style of preaching that I really appreciate. As I say, he's not as well known as the other guys on this list, but I had to include him here. This list is not exhaustive, and there are loads of names that I've left off that are as good, if not better, than some of the ones I've mentioned. But this is just sort of my personal list of favourites that I kind of keep going back to. But I'm going to throw out a few honourable mentions of apologists that I'm aware of, and I know are brilliant, and I've seen bits and pieces of. So yeah, a few names here. Check these guys out as well. I know for a fact that some of the people on my favourites list learned from these people, so they're well worth seeing. They're going to cover some of the same topics that we're already familiar with the other guys, but as I say, a fresh perspective is always helpful, and you're not going to be disappointed. Just want to add a few more honourable mentions to the list, who again, they're not my absolute favourites, but you know, I've learned from them and they're also well worth checking out. So hopefully that's given you a few people you can go and look up now, and especially if there's a particular subject that you was interested in and you wanted to find someone who could deal with that. I'm glad I can help.